Hi, this is Tropical Plants at 53 degrees north. So today we are going to look at this rather unruly character. This is an Oncidium Sharry Baby. I've had this about 16 months and admittedly it wasn't grown from a seedling. It was already pretty big when I got it. We've had a few growths on it, and the problem with it is that it's growing kind of horizontally rather than upright, and that in a relatively small greenhouse can be an issue. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to attempt to do something with it, to sort it out, to divide it up. Now, it's not my first time actually dividing an orchid rhizome, but it's certainly the first time doing something quite so complicated. So let's jump in. Dividing orchids, it's not something I've got a great deal of experience with, so I'm going to quotations teach it, and the reason I'm doing that is because it's the only way I can actually tell you my thoughts, explain what's going on in my head based on the knowledge and experience I have so far. I've only been growing orchids for 3 years. There might be some people out there watching who've been growing them for less than me. No doubt will be people who've been growing them for much longer than me. If you've got something to say, please put it in the comments. I'm always very happy to hear from people who's got more experience than I have, or however long you've been growing them. Just let me know what your thoughts are on some of the things I say and some of the things that I do. And no doubt I can learn from that, just as you might be able to learn something from my thought processes as well. Oncidium Sharry Baby, how long have I had this? Well, we've had it for 16 months. It came in a pot exactly the same size as this, and all I've done is swap it out just so I can see it. I think it was an opaque pot and I wanted to be able to see the roots. There is practically no media in there at all, which you'll see when we get close up to it. And as you can see, it really is a bit of a mess. It's growing in all sorts of directions. There's a couple of rotted pseudobulbs right in the middle. I'm hoping that it will split naturally, but we'll only know once we really get in there and have a good look at it. So why would you want to divide any kind of orchid, but in this particular case this Oncidium? Well, my reasons are because it's been in the same media probably for 2 or 3 years. At least I know for 2 years, or 16 months we should say, but I know it's been in the same media for at least that length of time. It's highly likely it's been in for much longer, so the media will rot, it will turn more acidic, which of course will reduce the vigour, although somebody tell the Oncidium that. The blooming wasn't quite as, in fact it wasn't anywhere near as good this year because it didn't bloom at all. So that tells me that something needs to happen to it. And the other reason of course is I've got rotted pseudobulbs in there which need to go. And the final reason, which is really my main reason at the moment, is because I want to get it so that it's not taking up so much space. So it may be a little bit of a problem because looking at it beforehand, I can only really see one place where it might divide, and I don't think that's going to solve my problem entirely. So it's only going to be by getting into there that I can really get the idea of whereabouts I can divide it, so I can get it upright and not taking as much kind of surrounding space up. And then of course I can buy more plants and fill them up with something else. So what we're going to do is get it over onto the bench and we'll really get into the nitty gritty of dividing this Oncidium orchid. Okay, now I'm not entirely sure whether it's going to be easier actually dividing the rhizome or setting up the camera in the first place. It's not the easiest angle because this is quite a big plant and I want you to be able to see down and see the same kind of view that I'm seeing. But what I've had to do is get down on my hands and knees. Is that a scale? Yes it is, and that's a good start, isn't it? I can see a scale insect and it's, I don't know whether you'll be able to see it. That's the first one I've actually spotted in the greenhouse, I think, ever. Can you see that there? A scale insect. So that will need taking off, which is pretty easy, but it's not the fact that I've got one scale insect, it's the fact that there may be some others. I can't see any others. I'll have to give it another good look. So this is Oncidium Sharry Baby Sweet Fragrance. Now, why Sweet Fragrance? Well, because I've got another Oncidium Sharry Baby somewhere. I might even have 2, I can't remember. I'm getting to the point where I've got that many plants, I forget what I've got, unless it's blooming. So the reason I got this one is because the other one, I'd heard so much about the fantastic fragrance on an Oncidium Sharry Baby that I thought, right, I must get one for myself. I got one, I waited 2 years for it to bloom, but unfortunately it wasn't that great in the fragrance. I didn't think so anyway. It turns out anyway, it must be me, it must be my nose, or maybe maybe it's just the fact we don't get that much in terms of sunshine when it bloomed. And obviously the sun usually brings out the fragrance a little bit more. But I had heard that sweet fragrance was the best or the strongest of the scents. Some people even found it quite cloying and didn't really like it because it was so strong, it was overpowering. Maybe in a house, but in the greenhouse, you know, it bloomed for me, it was lovely, it just wasn't what I was expecting. I actually got more fragrance off an Oncidium or a Borregia Isla I found. I might get another one of those. I killed it by allowing it to go too cold for too long. Really an intermediate plant that, so I'm going to possibly get another one once I get the hothouse up and running. So what I'm going to do is unpot this, let you have a look at it and see if we can figure out a way to do this with me being on my knees here. See, the things I do for you, I'm on my knees for you. So let's see if we can knock it out the pot, and I am very carefully, at the same time as knocking it out of the pot, very uncarefully, looking for signs of scale, because where there is one, there's bound to be another one. There's also some signs of slug damage as well. The slugs seem to like it. I see some trails. Even though roots are very prone, orchid roots especially, to rotting in my greenhouse environment, that doesn't seem to be the case with Oncidium Sharry Baby. It does with twinkles, unfortunately, but not Sharry Baby. Now already I can see, can you see that? I don't know if you can see that wobbly section there. So that seems to be a pretty obvious place to split it off. This is why once you get it out the pot, you've got a better idea. I hadn't really anticipated that. And that is very wobbly there, and I think that would be straight away a good idea to split it off. What I don't really want is, I don't want lots of smaller plants. I really want one specimen plant that will give me a really good load of bloom spikes. That's the ideal. I don't want lots of little ones. So this is something I'm going to have to be very careful of. So that possibly is somewhere to split it, but that will give me like several pseudobulbs on, no, I'll go with three pseudobulbs. Like the rule of thumb generally with these things is to leave 3 pseudobulbs on. Things like this, I don't know if you can see that, completely rotted, so that needs to go. So I'm going to try and give that a twist and see if I can get that out. I mean, it's not doing any harm. It's just, it looks unsightly. It's not coming out. Might have known there's another one there. Oh, that's come out much easier. So I've twisted that one off. This one I might have to wait until I've got the media off. Come on, Jeff, pull. Keep twisting. It's hanging on for all it's worth. Talk amongst yourselves for a minute. There you go. So that's that one off. I've got over another one there. That one's come off pretty easily. I mean, leaving these rotted things on is good food for pests, isn't it? I know scale insects, they're probably like the live things. All these things, all these sheaths and dead bits I really want to get rid of. And that'll give me a better idea of where to split it as well. Oh, crikey, it's in such a state. I'm sure some of you orchidists out there, and that is a word, I believe, orchidists. Some of you orchidists out there will be cringing at the state I've let this get in. But, I mean, the channel kind of started off as orchids, but it's kind of morphed into something else, really. Now that there is, I don't know if you can see that, that is quite a new pseudobulb, but looking around at this side, there is a hole in it. Now, has that been eaten? Or is there a bug already in there? I don't know if you can see. Probably not. Well, let's take some more of these out. I want to do something with these roots. I think what I'll do, probably a good idea, is to move the tray over there so that it's not all going in around. There's another rotted pseudobulb down there. I'm doing my best to show you this, but it's not easy. Are these roots alive? They feel very dry. I think most of them are. I mean, obviously these with where you've got the filament exposed and the inside they're dead. I mean, there is media in there. I think I'm going to have to be pretty brutal and try and untangle this mess of roots. Is there going to be damage? Yes, of course there is. There's going to be rather a lot of damage, but hopefully, I mean, it's unlikely to bloom this year, I guess. I mean, this media, if you look carefully, you can see there, it's just pretty much like, it looks like peat. It was probably bark at one point, but it's rotted down that much. In my experience from this particular seller, this is a popular eBay seller, we should say. I know they do grow some of their own, but they get a lot of them are imported. I mean, it's quite clear when you look at them that they haven't been repotted in a long time. And I'm not saying that as a derogatory comment. They clearly, you know, a lot of them come in bloom or in bud. So clearly they know what they're doing and they've got the right conditions, and they might not need to be potted as much as they do over here. But seeing as I'm getting into this, I might as well go the whole hog. So what am I doing here? Well, I'm just basically, there should be a word for this. You know, orchidists will know. You get your fingers into one of these root balls and you just kind of do that. I don't know what the word is. So come on, orchid people, what do you call that? Polite comments only, don't be rude. Well, you can if you want. So I don't know what you call it, but it just kind of untangles, it like teases them apart. It's very satisfying, I must say. So I'm not going to cut these off. There's probably as many dead ones here as live ones, but frankly it would just, I'll end up cutting such a big number of roots off that there'll be nothing to hold it upright. Okay, so that one's decided it's coming off itself, so it's pointless leaving that in there. You can see it's not attached to anything, it's not attached to the rhizome. So yes, I'm going to pull. There we go. Have we got any live roots there? Yep, I think we have. So that's one bit that's going to want cleaning up. Even that's not very upright, is it? It's kind of going off to an angle. So we'll put that to one side for a minute. Gosh, this is good for your glutes, this, kneeling up doing it. Again, another bit that seems very loose itself, so that's got to come off. Again, it's not really attached to the rhizome. So I'm going to pull that off. It's just the tangle of roots that's keeping it together. So that's another one. Now that one's a nice piece because that's nice and upright. It doesn't have any dead pseudobulbs. We've got there 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pseudobulbs. A couple of them are new. In fact, I can only see there's only that one there that's bloomed. So we're potentially there 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 potential new spikes to come from that one. So that's a really good piece. So we'll save that and tidy that up in a second. So what have we got here? Can that survive in a pot on its own, or is it too kind of angled to one side? That's where most of the roots are now, but they might be from the other pieces. It's really just that piece there. That's the piece with like a rotted section. Now it might have healed itself. No way you can see that, I don't think. I'll try and point it out there. There is a hole where my finger is there. Now, it could have been a slug, it could be something else, but it might have like healed itself up because the rest of it looks fine. Maybe I can get that in a pot as it is. I think we'll try. Like I say, I don't want loads and loads of plants. I have enough to look after without making half a dozen new sharry babies. This is where the old media is as well in here. For what media there is, there's not so much. So we're back to that. Come on, we want a word for that. A word for dealing with orchid roots. What could we call it? Orchid tickling. There is a skill, a phrase up north in England, and they call it, I think it's fish tickling. and they tickle the fish, they tickle trouts. In fact, there is a place called the Tickle Trout up in Preston, a bit further north than where I am. That's what they do with the fish, they tickle them underwater and it makes them kind of go into a trance, as it would, and they catch them that way. So maybe orchid tickling, root tickling, I don't know. I'm sure you can come up with something. So that looks pretty clean actually, apart from the tangle of roots there. It looks pretty clean as it is. I may well leave those as they are for now and deal with that at another time. So what I'm going to do now off camera, because I don't really think you'll want to see this, is I'm going to tidy up all these old bits. So all these dead bits, I'm going to trim all those off. If I can see any dead roots, I'll trim those off as well. And then we'll have a chat about the media and we'll put it in a pot. So I shall catch you in a few seconds. Okay, so we are over in a slightly different position now. And I'm going to start with the one that I'm not that happy about, or I'm not that hopeful for. So you can actually see now, can you see that rotted bit there? And I've actually found that the next one here on that side also has a rotted bit. I can't see any sign of scale on any of these plants, but that one I'm not really that hopeful that that's going to do anything. That pseudobulb seems to be all right, although it's not fully developed yet. But I'm still going to pot it up, you know, there's nothing lost trying it out. There doesn't appear to be, oh yeah, there are, I mean, these are okay. Some of them are okay. That one's dead. Some of them are okay. I'm going to leave them on, although dead roots can kind of clog up a pot. I don't think they do any harm. I don't think they're going to prevent new roots from coming. They might take up the space if you like, but obviously it's not going to be the case with this. It's just, I'm just going to leave these things on there just to give it something to anchor it down. So that's going to be one plant. The next plant is the main part of the rhizome, the biggest one. We've done the tickling, the root tickling, see, that's what we're going to call it. We've done the root tickling, we've got rid of a lot of the stuff from inside. I tend to find the rotted ones, or the really dead roots, are right in the middle there, so I've just yanked and pulled to get those out. I'm going to leave the rest to anchor it down. That is a big part of a rhizome. I'm just looking here to see what's bloomed and what's not. So this side is the new side. It's not like, you know, this is too big for me to kind of move it over to one side of the pot to leave room. That's just going to have to go in as it is. There's new ones in the middle as well. There's new one, that's a new one coming up there. So that is potentially a good plant, potentially one with more than one spike on. So that's the second one. Just move that to one side. So this one over here is my strongest hope, if you like. This is the one that's got most of the new growths on it. We've got one pseudobulb that's already bloomed, this large one, and all these others haven't bloomed. Or has it? No, that one's not bloomed. So we've got the 1, 2, 3, 4, that's 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we've got 5 pseudobulbs on this one that could possibly throw up a spike. It's got some good roots at the bottom there, a few rotted ones as well. Let's have a go at potting these up. So again, I'm not going to show you the whole potting up, I'll just show you one, but I thought you might want to look at the media that I've got here. In the past, when I've done these kind of plants, I have just used bark. I'm going to try something a little bit different today. So my environment is very prone to rotting roots. You know, we don't traditionally grow these kind of plants in the UK greenhouse for obvious reasons. It's too cold, the sun isn't out enough, it's not light enough, not bright enough. But obviously I'm trying in this greenhouse to create the environment that they like, although there are limitations to that. There are a lot of fluctuations with it being glass. They don't really like those fluctuations, but having said that, they are prone to root rot. I've not found that Sharry Baby has been particularly prone to root rot, but I still think that I want to err on the side of caution. I normally would just use bark to be nice and airy, but I'm going to put some perlite in because perlite makes sure or ensures that you are going to get some aeration in there. Once the bark is all wet, what the perlite does is kind of open that up and it helps it dry out a little bit more quickly. To that end, I also have lots of holes in every single pot. I add holes into it to make sure that there's lots of air. I'm also going to use, and this is a slight deviation from the norm for me, I'm going to use some of this coconut husk here. Reason being, it will allow some moisture to be in there, but for some reason coconut husk, the characteristic of it seems to be that it can contain some moisture or retain some moisture, but with plenty of air gaps. In other words, it's not going to get like really, I'm trying to think of a word, claggy is the word that we would tend to use over in the north of England, but I don't think the rest of the country uses claggy. You can imagine a media that's really closely packed tight together, a bit like clay if you like, where moisture just stays in there, doesn't evaporate off. Whereas coconut husk does tend to do that. It can hold on to moisture for a while, but it has lots of air spaces between. You can imagine, just by looking at it, you can see that it's going to have lots of air spaces. It's really the very, very fine mixture that would retain the moisture for too long. So I'm going to mix all that up, and that is going to be my main mixture for my Oncidium Sharry Baby, and let's see if that is just about hitting the spot correctly. Now, it's always worth pointing out with media, when people say, well, what media should you use? The answer is, as it always is with these things, it very much depends on your environment. I'm trying to make some adjustments for my own particular environment. If you live in a similar place, then maybe you should use the same kind of media, but of course it's very specific down to exactly where you're positioned. I could go across the road to the house across the road, go to their greenhouse, and because they're south facing and I'm north facing, they're going to get a lot more sun than I am. Maybe they don't need it to be quite as airy. Maybe they need their mixture to retain even more moisture. And this is the kind of thing, when we're thinking about media, that you've got to consider. It's your own specific environment, and what do you actually need? What's your experience shown you? Are you getting a lot of rot, in which case you need to open the mixture up and you need to allow it to dry out? Are you finding that you're having to water constantly because it's too dry, in which case you need something in there to retain a little bit more moisture? Maybe you need a bit of sphagnum moss in there to retain a bit more moisture. Those are the kind of decisions that we need to think about when we're doing this kind of thing. So, which shall I pot up? I'll pot my favourite. So this one is my favourite, and it's going to go in the same size pot that it's come out of. It's about as small as I can get away with. You can see I couldn't really get away with a much smaller pot than that. The reason I don't want a large pot is because large pots will then be prone to keeping the moisture in right around the roots, like further away from the roots. It's never going to dry that out, and that's not what we want. We want it to dry out. So, a little bit of media in the bottom there. Nothing to this really. So you simply feed it in round the side. I don't think this one is going to need staking. It's a really satisfying media, this mix. It makes a nice noise and it fills all the gaps. Again, orchidists will know what I mean. If you just use bark is, I find, a very unsatisfying potting media. When you're potting things up, it doesn't fill all the holes, there's always loads of gaps. Whereas this, because you've got big bits and little bits, all different size bits. Look, I've even got a little piece of charcoal there. I'll take that out actually. I'll give it a little break up, a little snap up. Who knows, a little bit of charcoal might make all the difference. Done. That's it, isn't it? That's all there is to it. Potted up. I'll label it, I'll put the date on the label for when I've potted it, I'll give it a water. In actual fact, I've watered the orchids less this winter than I've ever done. Again, just through experience over the past few years, I just find they don't need it. They're not growing, there's no sun out, and they're just not drying out. That's a really nice media to look at too. So there it is, Oncidium Sharry Baby, all nice and potted. I'll do the others now, and I think if you've experienced this yourself and you're in similar environment or even a different environment, please tell me in the comments, what do you feel about what I've done? Have I made the right decisions? Have you got something to add to what I've done? Something to add to my thinking? Because, you know, I will constantly change what I feel about these depending on what people say, what people's experiences are, what my own experience is. And this is the process, isn't it, of growing plants and learning from your past mistakes. Unless you make mistakes, you're never going to get any better. That's the way I look at it. If that's been at all useful to you, and there's my favourite one, one. I'll do the rest in a moment. And please give me a thumbs up. Tell me in the comments, as I've mentioned 3 times already, what are your experiences of dividing rhizomes, specifically Oncidium rhizomes while we're talking about Oncidiums. Tell me about your particular care, your experiences, what you would do with all those roots. Would you chop them all off and start again and just make sure that it's all clean at the bottom, or would you leave a few roots just for anchorage? I've obviously left rather a lot on this very big one here. Would you get rid of all those? Tell me what you think in the comments, and for now, I'll see you on the next one. Bye.